Hi there. Today, we're going to do a cultural presentation on Malaysia and explain how different factors have had a significant impact on food choices. We will explore cultural factors that influence Malaysian cuisine, what a traditional day of eating in Malaysia would look like, the availability of traditional Malaysian ingredients in Australia, and determine whether or not the Malaysian cuisine adheres to the recommended Australian diet. Malaysia is a country within Southeast Asia, lying just north of the equator and is made up of two parts, East Malaysia and West Malaysia. It is a highly multicultural country which is a result of the colonisation period of the British, bringing in vast numbers of people to work in the various different regions as farmers, builders and factory workers. The current population of Malaysia is 31.1 million. Statistics from 2010 show that there is over 1.4 million Malays who have migrated to different countries, with Singapore being the most popular at 1,060,628 people, and Australia coming in second, 119,197 people. One of the first Malay immigrants to arrive in Australia in 1837 was a 22-year-old convict named Ayub, but it wasn't until many years later that a significant number of Malays came to Australia. Significant changes to the Malayan population in Australia was evident in the mid-20th century, with the 1961 census showing that there were 5,793 Malaysian-born people in Australia. As of 2013, Malaysia was Australia's ninth largest immigrant group, with Australia's Malaysian-born population reaching 148,760. The most recent statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics estimate there was 166,200 Malaysian-born Australians, making up 0.7% of our entire population. Furthermore, 60 Years, Australia and Malaysia, published by the Commonwealth of Australia in 2015, states that Malaysian-born people are one of the best communities we have in Australia for integrating into the Australian community. The integration of Malaysians into Australia will specifically be explored throughout this presentation, looking at how they have or have not adopted the Australian cuisine.
The country of Malaysia has various dominant factors, particularly cultural and religious, that influence their own eating habits. Countries such as China, India, Thailand, and Indonesia are all prime examples of different cultures that have helped shape the Malaysian cuisine that is present to this day. Malay cuisine implements a multitude of roots, herbs, and spices that are commonly grown in the southeastern region of Asia, such as lemongrass, ginger, fennel, and cardamom, all of which play a significant role in Malaysia's cooking identity. The association with these spices can be linked back to Malacca, a southwestern city in Malaysia. This city acted as a vital trading center during the spice trade in the 15th century. As a result of this prosperous trade, a myriad of influences from outside countries brought in from migrants and traders have allowed the Malaysian cuisine to expand and develop. During this period, Malacca City grew to be one of Southeast Asia's most significant ports, where success allowed to help create the uniqueness of Malaysian cuisine. Malay cuisine has had many influences, none more so than from Thailand, China, and India. Malaysia's northern neighbour, Thailand, has incorporated its distinct flavour into their food through the intermarriage between locals and migrants. Furthermore, South Indian labourers, who were initially brought to work in Malaysian rubber estates by British colonialists, have also had an important contribution in bringing new ingredients and cooking techniques, one of which was the frying of spices in oil, garnishing the ability to yield additional flavour. South Indian ingredients such as eggplants and okra, as well as fenugreek and curry leaves, all play a big role in current Malay dishes. A key factor in Malaysian cuisine is the variety of religions and food beliefs. A primarily Islam-practicing country, the eating of pork is forbidden and is considered haram. These food laws are extremely important in countries like Malaysia, with large Muslim populations, check for halal certification of food imported from outside countries. Hinduism is another notable religion, with key food intake limitations. Hindu people are habitually vegetarian, with beef not being consumed at all, due to the cow being sacred to them. Different castes may also have varying rules due to certain ancient beliefs and myths, such as the Brahmins, who do not eat garlic and onion. Malaysia also has its fair share of traditions and celebrations that impact their eating habits. One of these traditions is the Akikah, an Islamic tradition where an animal is sacrificed shortly after the birth of a child. The killing of the animal, generally a lamb or a goat, is done in a humane fashion, where it must be free from any signs of weakness. Another significant celebration of the Islam population is Hari Raya Eid al-Fitr. Known globally as Eid, it marks the end of Ramadan, a month of fasting, where families reunite to celebrate together. Clearly, all these cultural factors have played a vital role in forming a Malaysian cuisine that is evident today.
As mentioned earlier, the Malaysian food and cuisine are very important as they are a major element of tourism promotion. Over the years, Malaysia has adopted many of its traditions in cuisine through the exposure of immigrants from neighbouring countries such as China, India, and Indonesia. Malaysian cuisine ranges from aromatic Malay dishes, delectable Chinese delicacies, to spicy Indian fare. The fundamental Malaysian foods utilize various types of vegetables and meats from immigrants in neighbouring countries like China, Vietnam, and India. One of the main ingredients found within any Malaysian dish is rice, the staple diet in most meals, which can be used creatively and various methods for different dishes. It can be easily found in popular Malaysian rice dishes such as nasi goreng, nasi kerabu, and arenzai lemak.
Malaysian cuisine is further influenced by ingredients such as belacan, a shrimp paste used in many Malaysian dishes to become a signature ingredient, aromatic and fiery herbs and spices, coconut and coconut milk, as well as seasoned beef, chicken, and seafood. Nasi lemak, influenced by the large Thai population in the North region, is also a common delicacy consisting of a rice dish cooked in coconut leaves. In addition, dishes such as rendang have been influenced by the migration of Indonesians into Malaysia. Lastly, nasi padang, a rice meal served with meat, fish, poultry and vegetables, is a popular meal in various areas in the surrounding central regions after the immigration of Sumatran people in the early 1900s. Evidently, many of these ingredients, whether traditional or influenced by the multicultural population in Malaysia, have contributed to the distinctive flavours of Malay food. So you may be wondering what a typical day of food preparation and consumption is like in Malaysia. A typical day of food is cooked either early in the morning or before the evening meal, with copious amounts of rice cooked at one time to use as the base for meals over the next 24 hours. Malaysians do not follow the westernized meal times, instead eating at key times of the day. A typical breakfast dish is nasi lemak, steamed rice with coconut milk and screw pine leaf. It is a meal that is considered as a national dish and is usually served early in the day. Coming around to lunchtime, you would expect to see a chicken or fish dish with rice. It would be cooked in coconut or tamarind with stir-fried vegetables and sambal belacan. Dinner would consist of a meal containing rice, usually in the form of steamed white rice. The Chinese community within Malaysia also like to consume noodle dishes as their main meal. There are a number of different Malaysian desserts ranging from all kinds of cakes to snacks known as kuih. In the Malay community, many of these traditional desserts are handed down from one generation to the next. It is evident that most of these Malay dishes have a home-cooked style to them and are generally served with a common rice bowl. But what about availability in Australia? Does everyone have access to the traditional ingredients needed to create their dishes? We have interviewed Mr. Sajali, a Malay currently living in Sydney, and Mrs. Chia, a Malay currently living in Melbourne, to gain an insight into the availability of their traditional foods in Australia. Mr. Sajali commented, "When I moved to Australia 10 years ago, it was very difficult to find traditional Malaysian ingredients, but nowadays almost all Malaysian food is available in Asian grocers." Mrs. Chia further agreed with this statement, saying that traditional ingredients can be found mostly in Asian grocers. Research supports these statements as there is a growing abundance of Asian grocers in most suburbs. This means that Malaysian immigrants no longer need to substitute unique ingredients like spices and pastes, as they are now readily available. Furthermore, rice is a common, inexpensive ingredient used in many households, both in Australia and Asian countries, and Mrs. Chia can happily purchase large amounts of jasmine or white rice from supermarkets such as Coles and Woolworths. Despite the availability of these traditional ingredients, Mrs. Chia's family's food choices have also been influenced due to acculturation, a process of cultural adaptation that occurs when individuals from different cultures come into contact with each other. For example, her breakfast will consist of Australian products such as Weet-Bix and Vegemite on toast. Furthermore, dinners are always a mixed menu, but they will often eat baked ribs, roast and veggies, or even a pizza. Evidently, traditional meals which would normally be consumed in Malaysia are absent from Mrs. Chia's everyday diet. It is fair to conclude that there is a strong availability of traditional Malaysian ingredients in Australia, which allow Malaysian immigrants to cook their traditional Malaysian meals. It can also be concluded that due to acculturation, Malaysian people such as Mrs. Chia and her family are adopting some of the traditional Australian foods and expanding their traditional cuisine.
The Australian Dietary Guidelines are a government health scheme which not only refer to health-related recommendations to implement into everyday life, but also lifestyle choices which ultimately positively affect Australians. As well as giving a range of food options and the correct consumption proportions, the dietary guidelines aim to give good recommendations so ideal dietary patterns and knowledge of food groups can be achieved to promote well-being and reduce preventable conditions, both onset through dietary influences and lifestyle choices. Through the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, a specific food-related subdivision of the dietary guidelines, visual representations of the necessary food groups and categories are displayed. Compared to Australia, the Malaysian population's overall consumption of grain is almost solely because of the large rice production. According to MUN, the consumption of rice occurs at least once a day. However, it is a central component of most meals as a side to eat with in order to provide balance and fulfillment. While the Guide to Healthy Eating recommends at least one-third of the day's food intake be from the grain category, Malaysians typically consume over the Australian recommendation. Despite the large intake of grains, the lack of variation throughout would, however, change the typical nutritional outlook of this category. As for vegetable input, the quantities in which Malaysians ingest strongly correlate to those of the Australian guidelines. Once again, the recommendation of Australians is for one-third of the day's food intake to be dedicated to vegetables, to which generally Malaysian populations seem to meet. Greens and grocers are easily accessible through local markets, and most meals have multiple different vegetable elements available as sides to be eaten with the main soups and curries. Variations between Malaysian cuisines and the guidelines come from the reigning categories of meat, dairy, and seafood, which divides into one-half of the day's intake respectively. A variety of meats are consumed, however, the vast array of religions and cultural standards prevalent in Malaysia play a large role in determining types consumed within the population. Due to the certain religions not being able to consume types of meat such as beef or pork, white meat is more popular and readily available. Ocean access and markets make the delivery of seafood easily and accessible, therefore it's a favourite among many. So, while the quantity of meat consumed remains the same, variations within types display its differences across the cultures. Fruits and dairy products are consumed at drastically reduced percentages compared to the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. Dairy, particularly, is often consumed below the Australian recommendation, mainly because the traditional signature dishes of Malaysia, like nasi lemak, are cooked using a coconut milk base rather than a dairy-based product like milk or cream. From an external perspective, the Malaysian cuisine seems to be within healthy boundaries by Australian standards. However, the numerous reports and studies informing of a prevalent vitamin D deficiency in Malaysian adolescents suggests otherwise. A cross-sectional study by Al-Sadar examined 1,300 adolescents in Year 7 using stratified random sampling. Throughout this study, an alarming result found 78.9% of participants were deficient in vitamin D. Similarly, Kwa found 33% of his 15-year-old participants were also under the 50 nanomole threshold, meaning they were also classified as deficient. Vitamin D can typically be found in foods like fish which have a high fat content, for example salmon. In addition, foods such as cheese and egg yolks are also known to contain vitamin D. Due to Malaysians and the lack of dairy intake, according to the Guide to Healthy Eating, it can be assumed that the vitamin D deficiencies are caused by the overall exclusion of these vital categories.
It can be concluded that the culture of Malaysia has been explored thoroughly throughout this presentation. A range of cultural factors such as religion, migration of other countries, traditions and celebrations have all had a significant impact on Malaysian food choices. After exploring the traditional Malaysian ingredients and dishes, which are easily accessed and created in Australia, it is possible that acculturation in Australia has led to some Malays adopting traditional Australian ingredients into their diet. The Malays' diet somewhat adheres to the Australian dietary guidelines, but there is still a need to increase the Malaysian dairy intake in order to reach the guidelines and potentially prevent vitamin D deficiencies, which are becoming increasingly evident in Malay teenagers. With a myriad of inspirations and influences, Malay cuisine has developed into a fascinating and diverse adventure, something that can be relished and appreciated with friends and family. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and we hope you enjoyed it.